All right, well, welcome everyone. As I mentioned, Chris is unable to meet with us at the start of this presentation, but she will be joining us a little bit later on. Welcome. My name is Ted Zeroni. I am a consultant with the Edmonton Regional Learning Consortia, the ERLC, and Chris, who has just got so many wonderful resources and ideas, will still be sharing with them. We're sharing them with you as we go along here, but she's not going to join us till a little bit later, as I mentioned before. This is the third session in terms of new curriculum series, the implementation series. Last June, we presented living systems and matter, and those are available on the ARPDC site. Just Google arpdc.ca and you'll get that site and you'll find the resources there. Just a reminder, those of you who are unfamiliar with the connection between ARPDC and ERLC and things like CARC, the Central Alberta Regional Learning Consortium or Regional Consortia, ARPDC is the umbrella. It stands for the Alberta Regional Professional Development Consortia, and there are a new number of various consortia all across the province that are regionally based. So the new curricula stuff is for the most part being under the umbrella of the ARPDC. So anything that you want related to the new curriculum, you'll probably find it at that site. That no matter which consortia has developed it, it'll be stored there. So that's the connection there. Before we get going, we do like to do a little bit of we do like to do a land acknowledgement. And often we accompany a little video to go along with it. I am going to show this one. It's one of my favorite ones, I think. If maybe you have seen it before, it's the Robin Kimmerer video, a short excerpt from and explanation of her stories in The Honorable Harvest. It's a beautiful book. If you haven't had a chance to read, Braiding Sweetgrass is really the name of the book. She is the author of that. So I'm just going to play this about 4 minutes, but I think considering it is October and harvest time, this is likely a good way to get us going for the day here.
If I could choose just a single element
Oopsie. That's always been a favorite of mine, and makes I really enjoy doing that one at this time of year during, as I mentioned, the um, harvest time. All right, so just because we are reaching across Alberta, our acknowledgement of land and people is fairly general, and I'd like to read it to you that in the spirit of reconciliation, we want to acknowledge this gathering is taking place on traditional lands across the province of Alberta, home to many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples. We acknowledge that this land is a traditional meeting ground, giving voice to its original peoples and the story of creation of this country in a way that history has forgotten. So once again, welcome. As I mentioned, Chris is going to be a little bit late. She is joining us though, and will be along to share some of her great activities and resources that she has to support this organizing idea of Grade 4. This is our agenda for the day. We're going to spend a little bit of time on that front end, still looking at the way the curriculum is put together, because understanding that is really integral into knowing how to organize the activities that we're going to be sharing with you, how they fit in, and how they'll impact learning. We're not going to go through as much detail as we have in the past. Those of you who've seen our videos in the past know we spend a lot of time in the front end with this, but we're going to slow down a little bit and perhaps layer on something a little bit different. If some of the things we're talking about is new in terms of concepts and conceptual understanding and the 3 phases of learning, you want to maybe double check or go back and look at some of our previous videos. We do have a session 1 associated with the series. Session 1 was an introduction to the curriculum as a whole. Session 2 is living systems. Session 3 was earth systems, and now not earth systems, excuse me, matter. And now we're doing session 4, beginning this year with that. So do take a look at those. They can be helpful in terms of understanding, again, some of the unpacking that we're doing here. One of the things we have mentioned is that this whole curriculum is a spiraling curriculum. Unlike the old curriculum that we've used to teach, or some of you maybe are still teaching, if you're well implementing or not, you're still teaching the old one, but some of your colleagues in other schools may still be using the old curriculum, which is basically broken down to topics. There's not much spiraling amongst it. It's basically going from one topic to the next in the grade and across the grades. But just to give you a sense of what I mean by about a spiraling curriculum a little bit more, it's this little series of graphics I hope will help you show how the concepts are linked together from grade to grade and how they grow from grade to grade. So if we take a look at grade 2, for example, so the key ideas in that grade are that the earth is composed of components on this that create our surface, and on that surface are plants and animals, air, bodies of water, and land, and those components together support life. Take a look at that graphic because it's going to remain exactly the same, but when we get to grade 4, all that's going to change is the color and a few of the names. So that foundation for the grade 4 curriculum is already laid in grade 2. Almost the exact same concepts are involved. Grade 3 is really just a closer examination of mainly bodies of water and land and how they change. The emphasis is on change, and components of the Earth's surface change over land or over time, and grade 3 takes an exploration of that. Then now we get to grade 4, you'll see the colors change, but the boxes remain pretty much exactly the same. We just label them a little bit different, and we're going to do something with them. In grade 4, instead of calling them components, we call it the Earth systems. And the Earth systems, again, are the biosphere, atmosphere, hydrosphere, and lithosphere. But similarly, grade 4 looks at how those systems support life. Grade 5 adds on to that mainly with the notion of climate. Climate is built in here, but climate is an interaction of all these things as well. So we're introduced to interaction and interconnection in grade 4. And then we take a look at climate as a more specific example of those interactions. But interestingly enough, by the time we get to grade 5, living systems as well, we get onto biological systems and the digestive systems. The whole idea of systems and components working together continues to build in science through the years. And of course, by the time we get to grade 6, we also look at climate in the Earth systems. That's the focus of Earth systems there. But again, we come to climate and change in grade 6 and talking about climate change more than anything. And you can see, though, that in living systems, we're still talking about systems, but ecosystems now, and the components of an ecosystem are the abiotic and biotic systems, which again relate specifically to the 4 spheres that we look in grade 2. So again, just an example, maybe more of a graphic of how this new curriculum is integrated and each year builds on from one year to the next. Specifically for grade 4, here's a concept map that introduces you to the big ideas in this organizing idea. As I mentioned, we're looking at the systems of the Earth on the surface, and those are the biosphere, lithosphere, and the hydrosphere. Taking a close look at what they are, what composes them, what makes them up, and then the key to that is that all those systems, if you look to the right, there's an interconnection between them. And some of those interconnections are affected by change. And change, again, is one of those concepts we looked at closely in grade 3. All those, not only are the different spheres interconnected, but many of them produce the natural resources that we have. And so those natural resources and what the different systems offer us requires some conservation in order to protect them for current use and for future use. And that involves taking some action at an individual, community, and global level. That's generally the broad idea of how grade 4 is organized. You have this, when you get the slide deck, you'll see there's a link on this slide. All this is just a reminder that this document is there, and it's useful to help see what were some of the key concepts that are taught before your grade in each of the organizing ideas and what comes after, so that you can better prepare and do some pre-teaching. If you know students are coming in with some pre-learning, you want to make sure that they still have that from the previous grade, especially some of those big ideas. And what are some big ideas that students will need to move and take with them onto the next grade. And again, just a couple highlighted things. For example, you may not read it. This is not a very good graphic, but the green is the concept of change. And you can see how change continues to string together through each of the grades in the Earth systems organizing idea. And it shows up in other organizing ideas, not just Earth systems. This document has one of these for each of the organizing ideas. If you're interested, take a look at that. That link is there for you. I do want to stop, pause, and talk a little bit about the skills and procedures. They are, again, what students do to demonstrate their knowledge and understanding. They aren't the specific skills and procedure statements. They're really just the verbs, because we could take those skills and procedure statements and interchange the verbs, have kids still do something, but something different to demonstrate their understanding. And I'll show you what I mean shortly. Disregard this bottom box down here. That should be gone. I don't have this finished for Ks 4 to 6, but you'll find that they're going to be very similar. What you'll see when you do get yours from 4 to 6 is a list of the verbs, which is on the left-hand side here, which show up in the learner outcomes. And you'll see that many of these verbs are repeated in the grade 4 to 6 learner outcomes, such as investigate, which shows up in this organizing idea, Earth systems for grade 4. Investigate shows up in grade 4's learner outcome, this one specifically. But those aren't the only verbs. There are many more. And once again, this is a K to 3 list. I'm still not finished the 4 to 6 verbs. They're coming out shortly. But I can tell you there's not much of a difference here. Most of these are repeated through grade 4. And it's not grades 4 to 6, excuse me. And it's not too much a surprise, because those are also verbs. They're just thinking verbs. They're verbs that we are going to probably see in social studies. You probably see those in Pew and language, or ELAL, and probably some of them even appear in math. So the idea is that the more kids are used to these skills and they're used to the word, if they know what discuss means, and we go through some teaching, direct teaching about what discuss means or representing, students become accustomed to the verbs and what they're expected to do when they are confronted with them. So if a student's asked to classify or sort, we assume when they get to a point eventually where we don't have to stop and explain that, that they know it because we've taught it and we've used it so many often and brought it to their attention so many times. I'm just going to move on here. That's just what's there. So I guess what I'm getting at is that some of the times these skills can be interchanged. If we take a look at this cusp line, it's the third cusp line with this understanding that Earth systems include natural resources that are central to human well-being. Two of the skills and procedure statements underneath that understanding are the yellow ones that relate human activities to changes in Earth's surface and relate activities of plants and animals to changes in the Earth's surface. One thing we could perhaps probably do is even do another verb. We can take another one of these key verbs and say, well, why don't we compare activities of the plants and animals to changes in the Earth's surface? Which one has a greater impact and to what degree? So once again, just because you don't see those verbs listed in the skills and procedures, it doesn't mean we can't use it to get students more exposure to using them. And as you'll see soon, the more opportunities that kids have to explore those understandings, such as activities of plants and animals make changes to the Earth's surface, the more students are exposed to those in different ways, the greater transferability happens. They become deeper and deeper aware of that understanding because they're using it in a variety of ways. And finally, just a brief look at the understanding. Just remember, those understandings are those individual concepts that showed up in those concept maps that I showed previously, but they're strung together and put together in a statement that has some kind of a logical and meaningful order. Welcome, Chris. I see you're there.
Hi, everybody.
So in grade 3 or grade 4, for example, in one of the cusp lines, we have 3 concepts of human well-being, natural resources, and of course, Earth systems. And how can these concepts be put together in a logical, meaningful order? We have 2 possible ways to put them together. One might be Earth systems include natural resources that are essential to human well-being. Or another one might be Earth systems must be protected to ensure natural resources are available for human well-being. Exact same concepts, and individually, those concepts mean the same thing, but put together in a certain way, in different manners that make sense, we can see we have 2 totally different understandings. And it just so happens that that first way of putting those concepts together is actually the understanding that does show up in the grade 4 curriculum. We see it right there. And we see that it's in that cusp line that talks about the natural resources. So of course, Earth systems was developed, that concept was already developed in another cusp line, the first cusp line of this organizing idea, but it's joined together in this understanding. The whole notion that we can take skills and move them from cusp line to cusp line, an organizing idea, and from grade to grade, is that whole notion of transfer. Skills, we know, transfer in a variety of contexts, but so do the understandings and so do the individual concepts themselves. For example, if we were to take a look at these concepts in terms of, down at the bottom, you can see some of the grade 4 science concepts of atmosphere, biosphere, hydrosphere, and lithosphere. Can we see those in these 3 different contexts? Similar kind of situations, we have a fishing village, so that's something that's common, but other things may change if you take a look at it closely. And having kids being able to identify those in those different concepts gives us an indication of their level of understanding with them. Or we could take an understanding that Earth systems interact with one another, resulting in environments that sustains life. Is that true here? Can we see interaction here? What are the Earth systems that we see interacting here? In what way? What impact does it have? And we could give a whole new different context for the same understanding. Is that true here in this context? So those understandings are the important things, the skills and the understandings, because they transfer from place to place. And it's understandings where we should really be spending the bulk of our time and our focus. And again, another example of a different context is there interaction here between the different spheres that help sustain life in an environment. And students should have that conceptual understanding to take a look at those contexts and be able to identify or give examples of why that is true in that particular context. This graphic, those of you who have been with us in the last few sessions have seen this before. There's just a couple new things added on to it, but this is the phases of learning, and the phases of learning go through a surface level where those basic introductions are given to those concepts. So those introduce students those skills for the first time. We say, here's what it is, here's comparing and contrasting, here's how I do it, here's how it's done. And in the deep level, that's where you begin practicing those skills and getting better with them. And we want to get them to the point where they can transfer those skills and use them in a variety of contexts. The new arrow at the bottom of this says that when we want to move our understanding of concepts from surface to deep, we take them through that progression as well. The surface level is really a basic memorized definition. They know the definition, they can tell it. They may be able to give examples of that concept that you talked about in class. We want to deepen the understanding of that individual concept, and that's why that arrow at the bottom moves forward by giving students more opportunities to see if they can see those concepts in various situations, whether it be a story, a video, a poem, a song, outside in their environment, and can they then transfer it to a new context. And when you start looking at deep, we're already beginning to transfer. Deep is just giving kids opportunities to new contexts. By the time they get to transfer, they're starting to do that independently. Same goes with the understandings. They go from the deep to transfer mode. The deep mode with those understandings is where we put those concepts together in that understanding, and they try to develop those and get a sense of those. And now that they've got them linked and they make sense to them, then we give them those different contexts to apply that understanding. And then our transfer is giving them a context, again, that they've never seen before, and independently say, is this understanding here? Let's do something with it in this context. In order to plan for the units, Chris and I are giving a little bit of a different approach. We're saying, let's stop and do that backward by design planning, where we take a look at our assessment. How do we want to assess kids at the end of the understandings or at the end of the organizing idea, perhaps to address the learning outcome? What is that assessment piece? And whatever kids are going to need to know and be able to do should guide the type of surface level work, deep level work, and get that done so that we give them the assessment piece. They know what they need to know and are able to do what they're supposed to do to be successful on the assessment. For example, if we were to assess this, do some kind of a summative assessment for the learner outcome where students investigate the systems of the earth and reflect on how their interconnections sustain life, we may give them this investigative problem. We'll talk about investigation a little bit later on. It is a certain procedure that occurs from scientific method. I'm not too sure if that's what the authors of the curriculum meant here, but that's where we're interpreting it, that we want students to go through that investigation process. So an investigation begins with a problem, and that's down here in the red. What is the interconnection between Earth's spheres, including human activity, in a boreal forest, which is also called a taiga? And include, when we're talking about the interconnections of those the different spheres, one, include natural resources. We know change and conservation are going to come up in that response. I'll give you an example of how we may develop that assessment a little bit later on. But in order for them to do that, we know that they need to know a lot of things. They need to know what your spheres are, the 4 different ones. We need to know what a relationship is, because as soon as you start talking about interconnection, you're talking about relationships. What is change? What is conservation, natural resources, and human activities as well? So those are all things we want to make sure they understand at the surface level, and then give them opportunities to deepen their understanding, and then give them that final opportunity to complete an assessment like this. They may even get an assessment exactly like this, but with a different context, maybe an oasis in a desert, perhaps. They could do the same thing, and then their assessment will be a totally different context. They're going to transfer it to the boreal forest. Of course, they're going to need to know the investigation process and some of those basic research skills in grade 4. So the learner outcome is one of those ends that we can begin with. We also know the understandings are ones that we'll want to assess at the end to make sure they can move on, because they're all, in a sense, interconnected as well. I have all the arrows here because these are really almost really directly related to that summative assessment that I just referred to for the learning outcome, you can see that the first understanding and the first cuss line is almost very similar to the learning outcome itself. But if you know, the assessment that I had also talked about the interconnectedness being impacted by small changes, and that the interconnection can include how we use natural resources, and the interconnection can include some of the conversations practices we do, because those conversation practices can impact the other spheres, and our use of natural resources can impact those other spheres as well. So I want to make sure that students have each of those understandings, though, of course, before we move on into the to that bigger assessment, if that's the way you want to plan it. But even so, if we take a look, then we're going to just focus just on that final assessment that we had. Once again, here's some of the skills that we need to know. We're going to have to introduce and make sure they know at the surface level, and then deepen those understandings along with these at the bottom. We've mentioned those before. But even as well, there's some other things that come into play here, and that's some pre-assessment of prior learning that's happened. As I showed you in that previous graphic at the very start of how the different grades and the concepts and the grades are interconnected and built together, they do appear in grade 4. And so there may be some pre-assessment to do for some of that prior learning. And what Chris is going to do now is to sort of run through some of those, some of that prior learning that had been done from K to 3, so that in an ordinary year, when all students have had all 4 years prior to grade 4, you'll know what they're coming in with, and you can do some pre-assessing to see if students do have those abilities and that knowledge. So take it away, Chris.
Okay, so in that vein that we talk about prior learning, and just before I talk about that, when Ted talked about the difference or the opportunities to find those relationships in the boreal forest on slide 30, that's a really, really good slide to consider if we want to have students have voice and choice, because now I could replace that boreal forest, as he said, with something else. So what is it that really interests each of the children, and where do they see that they really want to hang their hat and do a little bit of research in? So yes, there are quite a few things that we have been doing already in the past. Students have been talking about environments, and in those environments, defining them. This is coming up from grade 2 already. So those are pieces that we want students to be very familiar with. We want them to be able to have the previous understandings and learnings, because they're talking about what makes up these Earth systems and environments. So I'm on the next slide already, Ted.
Sure, Chris, do you want me to stop sharing, you take over? Would that be easier?
Sure, if you want me to, I can do that.
Yes, I think it's easier when you're talking to know when to click the slide, so we'll do that.
Sure. Okay. So when we look at some of the things that the students have done, there are some pretty big rocks that have already been covered in other grades. So again, it isn't that we're going to go back and reteach all of the components of the curriculum, but we certainly are going to have to make sure that they have an understanding of at least the terminology. So as we have done in all of the other grades, anything that we felt was kind of a bigger rock that you might want to just touch base with the students on, or even if you just want to go through it with them, we've included those in this slide deck prior to showing you sort of the surface level materials that we would show you for the grade 4s. So again, environment was one of them. Asking students, what is an environment? How would you describe it? Ted's done a fantastic job of creating a concept attainment one on what an environment is. And I don't know if you had a chance yet, Ted, to go through a concept attainment. Have you done that, or did you want to go through?
Not yet. Well, I'll go through a different one later on, perhaps.
Okay.
Yeah.
But those are amazing ways for the kids to learn. And so again, this links to it. That would be a great way for you to find out whether the students have a good understanding of what an environment is. We did introduce a graphic that would sort of helps to consolidate some of the things that had happened even in previous grades, but the difference between natural and man-made materials. What are the components of an environment? We look at what are the important elements of an environment. We talked about that as well. So this might too just be a great demo that I could show up to students and unpack with them some of that terminology that I need, but also just linking it to some of the big ideas that were in those previous grades. From grade 3, we talk about what are the components of Earth's system. And so this is a really strong tie into what you're about to launch into right now with the grade 4s. So again, just this is a link even or an offshoot from basic needs that students did in the primary grades. So it's a part that we wanted to really unpack with the students. They do a lot of work then when it comes to landforms. More specifically in the grade, they're also looking at the landforms that exist in Alberta. So they start to learn a little bit more about their province. But again, each of those landforms have different influences, different areas. So we can talk about how that is what systems are reflective in those areas as well. So these are here, not necessarily to say that I would use all of them in grade 4, but they may be some backups that we might want to use or have students explore before they actually launch into the relationships between different systems, especially where they're looking and what they've looked at. Landforms. Again, students, that was new to them. So one of the suggested surface level materials that we provided for grade 3 was just a simple graphic like this. It's a video, a YouTube, but it just starts off with terminology and just unpacking some of that terminology. Do they know the difference between a canyon and a valley? Do they know the difference between a mountain and a hill? Like, what are those? And if I live in a city that I've never been traveling a lot, I might not know that. Can't just take for granted that every child's experienced those opportunities already. That owl just loves to talk. Water is another one that we spent a fair bit of time on. How does water affect an environment? How does water affect a landform? What are some things about glaciers that we talk about? Why are glaciers so important to us? Because they also service us for the water that we have. And how do we see water not only in our culture and our vision of the importance of water and the uses of water, but when we look at it from the Indigenous lens, what does that look like? And water has a very different meaning and a very, very important meaning when we talk about the First Nations. So these are just slides in here that are informational pieces that, again, may augment some pieces that you may wish to touch, but not necessarily having to go through them all. Plate tectonics is part of that landform that we were talking about. How does the Earth look now? How did it look 200 million years ago? And we even asked the student, what do you think it might look like 200 million years from now? Clearly, it's not a right or wrong, and it's not like any one of us are going to have the magic answer to that. But again, it's just to start children to think about the fact that nothing in the Earth is fixed. It's a living environment. And the landforms are continuing to change, even though we don't feel the movement because we're part of it. We don't experience that. Tied again into ours, how does human activity change some of the things that we find on the Earth? So in this case, what phase changes occurred when we talk about, in this case, glaciers? How is glaciers changing? And is this a direct responsibility or a result of what humans are doing? In the most cases, yes, it is. It's the kinds of things that we're putting in the atmosphere. So we are responsible. How can human activity change some of these things? So again, when we start talking about the systems, the different cycles and systems that the Earth is made of, that's going to be an important question for students to wrestle with, is how healthy is our Earth and what can we do about it? Story of the Athabasca Glacier, again, trying to keep it in-house, trying to keep it close to Alberta. This is one that you'd find between Banff and Jasper. Again, what are we seeing? We're seeing changes. What are the significance of those changes? And then tying again a little bit into our natural resources, what are the importance of dinosaurs? What are the importance of fossils? What does that help us in a lot of cases when we talk about fossil fuels as well? What are the connections between those? So when we're talking about those components in natural resources in grade 4, a little bit of background from grade 3 would be helpful. And dinosaurs are a big one for kids. I mean, that's an area that they're always very interested in. A couple of new books that came in that would be helpful from grade 3 that also could just definitely could link into grade 4 would be Digging Up Dinosaurs. Soil and Weathering. This is an actual presentation that's been created for how do the elements, in this case, weathering, affect the landforms that we're seeing and how that might change. There's been lots of predictions saying the Earth has become much more windy. The Earth is changing the way that the tides are coming off of the ocean, and it's going to change our weather. And why is that? Is it linked to the fact that we are clear cutting and that we are cutting down trees? And that was said many years ago, that keep cutting and you're going to get much more windier, but you're also cutting the very lifeline that you have, which is the oxygen level that your trees are producing for you. So those are kind of the roundabout things that we've already talked about. That is not the entire slide deck, it's just some of the important ones that you might want to use. We talk about the Earth systems. We talk about what's happening within Earth. Kind of did this in the first round that when we did the pilot, kind of had created it more in terms of, let's look at it from a spaceship perspective. And if Earth is a spaceship, what are the components that we would need to live on that spaceship? What do we need to survive? And what are the components of the spaceship that are keeping us alive? From an instructional approach, there's a lot of different possibilities. I'll let Ted talk about this one, and then I'll come back in just a minute.
Sure. This slide is just there to remind us that there are a lot of different instructional approaches, not only at the surface level, but at the deep end transfer level as well. And you can use a variety of these at different stages. Concept attainment, you'll see lots of examples of that at the surface level here coming up shortly. That's mainly going to stay within the surface level, but something like case studies is something you can use to introduce concepts with. But you can also use case studies to deepen students' understanding, and of course, use case studies as a transfer and assessment tool as well. So, while we're just showing some instructional approaches, just know that you probably have a lot in your own suitcase. Pull them out and use them along the way. Be intentional about what you're trying to do with it. Develop some basic skills and understanding and knowledge, or some understandings, or transfer. So if we go to the next slide, you'll see a whole list of potential ones. So what Chris just did was took a look at what was previously learned, and some things that will come in, that will help students out to be successful in this organizing idea from previous grades. But here's a whole list of other concepts that are very transferable. You can see, like system, relationship, representation. You'll see those appear from grade to grade, but some of them become more important in some grades than others. So, for example, system, that one's under revision, but we know that when we took a look at that concept map at the start to see the grade progressions, we saw that system was a constant concept that showed up, ecosystems, solar system, bodily system. So that understanding what a system is, and all systems have components that work together, is a good concept for them to understand. We know that in this learning, in the organizing idea, learner outcome in grade 4, the word interconnection is in there. There's students investigate the interconnections. What is an interconnection? There's an activity there to introduce what interconnection is, but there's also, we have to keep in mind that interconnection is an example of a relationship. So what is a relationship? There's concept attainment there that will help you determine that. And a really good way to show relationships is through concept maps. And if students can take those individual concepts, 4 or 5 of them together, and put them in a concept map, and then explain to you why they've connected them together, you're gonna find out really quickly whether they understand those individual concepts or not, because if they're not going to make a logical connection in a concept map if they can't do that. So it's a quick and easy way to get kids to show their relationships and their understandings. So there's a whole lot of activities there. Most of them are developed so that they could be used in the primary grades as well. They're very graphically oriented. And if you could maybe connect on interconnection, because that's the new one that I made for this. It's at the bottom of that list under relationship. I forget if it's a concept attainment one or not. No, it's not. But you could just quickly give a slide through, and you get a sense of, it is a concept attainment lesson. Maybe it's not. Maybe I forgot to take that slide out, but keep going. The way a concept, it is a concept attainment lesson. So with a concept attainment lesson, the format's basically the same. Kids are given an example of the idea. Sometimes the idea is named if they probably don't know what interconnection means. I'm assuming a grade 4 student may have an idea, but be not too sure what interconnection means. Sometimes you just say, I have an idea in mind, and I'm going to give you a yes example and no example. What's the idea I have? In this case, we're taking a look at what interconnection is. We can go to the next slide. That's where I give examples and non-examples. The set the first set on the left is a yes. That's an example of an interconnection. The set on the right is less of an example of an interconnection. We give students a chance to examine that. And there's another one that there's something called an interconnection with the yes group there, and maybe not so clear with the no group there. So what is it that it makes an interconnection? Now I've got two there. I haven't categorized them. Which one is a clear example of interconnection? And then we go on, and certainly there's a discussion happening around the way, and for sure that's a yes. So what makes a yes? Why is that a connection have? What is an interconnection? And then we give the definition. We can talk about it being the way things are linked or connected together. In other words, when there's an interconnection, all things have some kind of relationship with each other. And there's that term relationship show up again. And then again, you just go on and give students some assessments later on. Along the way, to ask them their thinking. So there's an explanation as to why there's this interconnection, and so on. So we can go from there, from that slide deck, Chris, because the concept attainment activities that you'll find follow that similar program. They're not all concept attainment activities either. Maybe just a really quick explanation of some of the other activities you'll see there. We know that in my final assessment, I want to talk about doing an investigation. There's some information there, sort of 2/3 of the way down. Now, that break down what an investigation is, those investigative scientific methods or investigation steps are in the scientific methods organizing idea for grade 2. You won't find them in grade 3 or grade 4. Grade 4 hones in on one of those particular steps. So to follow an investigation, you'll want to take a look at that. And then within the investigation, a variety of steps, including observing, analyzing, predicting, making conclusions. What does that all mean? Well, there's some, and how can you introduce that to them? There's some introductory activities there. And finally, a new one again as well is, we know at the surface level, students need to know what not only the Earth's spheres are, which Chris is going to show you from slides 56 to 75, but what are resources, natural resources. There's sort of a lesson to introduce that at the surface level as well as conservation, which is going to show up a little bit later on slide 77. So those are all things you're not going to teach all at once in the front of at the front of that all at once. You're going to pick and choose depending on what cusp line you're on and which of these surface level activities may be helpful for you to move on and develop that cusp line. Go ahead, Chris.
So when we unpacked this the first time, and I kind of kept this because it was well received, and I like the idea of kind of stepping it through in a storybook or a spaceship format. So looking at sort of what are the systems that we're unpacking, wanting to know kind of when you go in a spaceship, what do you need? What would you need to take with you? What would you need to survive? I need some oxygen, I need some food, I need some warmth, and all those different pieces, but just a little bit of a fun thinking activity for the students before we just sort of launch into the different components that we have. So again, this is not meant to be the unit. This is a possible structure of information, and this is very surface level information about how I might put some of this together and what I might be looking for. And again, a case study approach is a great way. Once I know a little bit of information, I could get 3 or 4 different examples. I could read 3 or 4 different stories. I could read 3 or 4 or watch 3 or 4 different videos, and then find what are the interconnections between those. And that's a really rich way for students to show us what they know. So in this case, the Earth's spheres, if we just want to know, I would want to ask students first just to see what they even think it is. So they might not even know what the words mean. So brainstorm with a partner. What do you think the 4 spheres are? What do you think what is a sphere? And they might just say it's a ball. Good, that's a good start. You could let them watch this video then and just see if they come up with some better answers to what you've asked them before. And again, they're not doing any detail. We're not doing any super deep dives into these. That's not the responsibility in grade 4. I have an opening video here that I could use sort of as my starting point, as a discussion point. So then as we unpack these spheres, I did it more as a who am I? If I've watched that opening video, maybe I can sort of do a Jeopardy kind of question, and I am made up of. This is what I'm made of. I've got 5 layers. I'm made of a combination of many gases. What am I, right? So it's just giving the kids a little bit of fun in the way that trying to zero in the concepts that they have to understand here. I'm helping to protect life on Earth, and prefix of my name means air. So then if they can guess it, great. And now we're going to unpack ever so quickly a surface level kind of conversation. You could either do that with any one of these videos, and I would never do all three of these on the same day. I might preview them, pick the one that you want to open with, and then the other ones just become revisits and review and strengthen my understanding, because no two videos ever offer you exactly the same information. There's always a little bit newer stuff that comes into it. And then what is the atmosphere? What have they learned the atmosphere is? What impact would it have on life if we didn't have it? What would happen? So just still pretty surface level, but it's starting to me thinking about what the atmosphere does for me and what would happen if it wasn't there. Okay, let's see if we can get past that. So if I look at the second one, who am I? I am all the water found on Earth, and so on. So it kind of goes through the different spheres in that same manner. Gives me a who am I question. It gives me some hints that I'm going to go through, and then unpacks it again at a very surface level. There's nothing deep about this. I left this in the bottom here because I want to explain that to you. So taking just a bit of what is the hydrosphere, where am I going to start? This is not going to get me a lot of interconnections. This is just saying, here's what the atmosphere is, here's what the hydrosphere is. So just learning what each of the four are. If you want to use materials from the National Geographic, just be aware that that's something that you have to use in-house within your classroom. So it's not something where I can take the entire materials that they have and post it within this particular presentation, because that would be a copyright violation. So that's why I have that note left there. But there is a lot that is there that's available to us that we can use that is really relevant. So if you're looking for a source, that would be one. Okay, and then I have some video looking at a third one as I go through who am I? And we're just talking again now. So we just keep doing this process of we're looking at the different spheres, we're unpacking them in a very general term, looking at the components. And then when we look at the lithosphere, there are some little bits and pieces in there that we want to do. The students do not have to memorize this, but it is a really important component of them to understand, especially when we already talked about in the surface level plate tectonics and things are shifting. They should have some idea of what's happening below their feet and kind of what the components are. So this is not to be that they have to memorize anything like that, but they should have a sense of what these layers are actually reflecting and why are they different and what impact do they have in our world as we live from day to day, and definitely certain parts of the world more so than we would have here. And then we have some questions in here where we can talk about. It's where I would find the plate tectonics. It's that conversation. So that goes back to grade 3. If you don't think the students know that, there is a book called Landforms. It talks about plate tectonics. That one that we talked about, the shifts of the Earth's continents over 200 million years. Again, that gives them a chance to see what that looks like. So just going back and picking up whatever you need at that point. And then our fourth one, made up of all living things. So we're talking about the biosphere. And again, unpacking that in a slightly more detailed way, because that's a big one for them. And most of the students have heard about the biosphere. That's not one that they are completely new to. I did include some times in here just to point those out to you. There is a lot of information in this video, not all of it relevant to grade 4, and hence why you have some start and stop times in there. So when we talk about conservation, which is one of the pieces, we're looking at those 4 important spheres that we have on Earth and those systems, how they interact with one another. We talk about conservation, and that's going to be important for students to realize, like, what are we doing to our Earth? Are we responsible? What is the human impact? So a little bit of that work came from grade 3 already. But now, in a bigger way, how are we impacting? And what happens when humans interact or impact animals? How do we impact plants from the perspective of those 4 spheres as well? So we talk about preservation and protection. Do they know of any examples where there's conservation in the area that you live in? Is that something that is ever talked about? Is that something that's obvious to them? Is it something that they would be not even familiar with? So again, it depends on the location that you're in. talking a little bit about habitats, looking a little bit about examples of those. Here are some examples of conservation. We also have some really good ones in national parks. They have some great conservation examples. So if the children travel in summer, they may have some examples that they bring up there. So when I move away from sort of the deeper level pieces, I'm also looking at that sort of notion of what's going to open the eyes and the ears of my students to think about these four spheres that they're living in. These particular videos here, just in case you're not familiar with this series, it's called Nature Speaking. And it's basically, the kids get kind of enthralled because it's a lot of very famous actors that they would have seen or heard of already. But they're talking in terms of Mother Nature. And I would like to play one of those with you. Just Julia Roberts talking about as Mother Nature. They're not designed to give information. They're more designed to prompt the kids thinking about, wow, what did she just say? What does that mean? What does that do for me as a student? What do I need to think about how that impact might be? And there's same thing for water. They talk about nature. I just grabbed some of them that were more related to our four spheres. So I'm just going to play the Mother Nature one. It's a very short one.
We don't have any sound on our end, Chris.
Oh, okay. I'm so sorry.
That's all right.
I'll stop it. I thought when you had played, oh, that was my fault then because we switched over. I was just thinking you had already played the information at the beginning, so then you would have had sound. So that's my fault.
I can make you host if you want.
Nope, that's okay. Well, I'll just leave it for now because we'll have to go back out and come back in again for me to turn on the sound. So right now, these are just short clips, but I would start with the Mother Nature one simply because Julia Roberts is talking as if she is Mother Nature. And she's talking about, I've been around a lot longer than you have, and I'm going to be around a lot longer than you are. So in that case, how is that going to impact my thinking as a student? What am I doing to Mother Earth? Mother Earth has made some changes. She's able to adapt. Sometimes we aren't. Like we can't make those changes as quickly as she does or adapt as easily. So this is a powerful little series that I would encourage you to have a look at and explore with the students. It's fascinating even as adults just to go through it. One of the other slide decks we just add a little bit on to this is what is the human earth relationship? So how do I start to connect some of those pieces to what I'm looking at when I talk about systems? Where's the connection in that? I need to make sure that students have a good understanding, first of all, of the four spheres. I need to see, do they see themselves in any one area? Do they have an interest in any one area? And that's that piece going back to slide 30 that Ted had sort of framed for you. To me, that slide leaves an open door for a student who has a particular interest to really find their way in there. And if you're comfortable with them being able to do that, then you're going to make it richer for the students as well. But here are some thoughts about what we could do for relationships for deep and transfer. Again, as Ted will have mentioned before I even came on, a deep question in a transfer could be exactly the same. It's just one's a new scenario again. And so depending on how you framed your unit, some of the ones that we're suggesting here could be your summative. Some of them would just be your first time deep. So again, it's how you've structured your unit, but some ideas about conservation, group efforts, the impact of land, natural resources, organisms. We see people withdrawing natural resources from the earth. Does that have any impact We have fracking that's been an issue. How does that change? Does that have an impact on things? Minimize disturbances and impact on plants and animals. Do we ever see examples of that? So again, if the students have gone to a national park, they often will see a sign that says, please stay on path, because they are trying to preserve the plants, the natural fauna that you're finding there. They don't want it damaged. So they're trying to preserve and regrow an area, or they've marked it off. In wintertime, you often go, if they go skiing, if they go snowboarding, ask them, do they ever see anything that's marked off with ribbon where no one's allowed to go in? Again, that's a measurement of snow, but it's also sometimes very sensitive areas. So just kind of tapping on where the kids have been and what they know. Relationships, how does the human activity impact the relationship between land, air, and water? These are all really great questions, and I can zero it in on an interest level, or I can do it on a more global level. So we leave these for you to just have a look at and see where students are going to fit into this notion for you. This is a big topic. There's a lot of possible directions to go. So again, you know, where you saw your unit starting or finishing would be kind of where they're going to go. How are these spheres interrelated? As Ted talked about, some kids don't even know what interrelation is. So we need to make sure that they're clear on that first. And then I see this very simple diagram, but what is the connection between them and how does that work? So quick video there that they can use, or you could ask the question and they could verify it with the video that they're watching. Okay, so if we were going to look at some of the samples, possible transfers, did you want to talk to this one, Ted?
Well, this is more an in-depth look at the sample summative that I gave at the start of the presentation. Say we're going to do the summative. There's a lot of things kids will need to know and be able to do, including, you know, what's an interaction, as you mentioned, or interconnection. How do you do research? What are some things at the grade 4 level? You know, they should have been practiced probably doing that. A lot that they need to know. Nonetheless, in that list of all the links, there's that one page of a bunch of blue lines of different links. One of the things in there that would be helpful for this activity is as well an assessment on a one point rubric for research at grade 4 based on the competencies for grade 4. So that's available in here as well. But then, of course, when it comes to resources, one of the things students, if you're doing an investigation, they're going to gather their information not through an experiment or going outside. In this particular exercise, it's going to be research. And sometimes that's the way students gather information or do that step in the investigation process, is to do the research. So they have a problem, they make some predictions, they figure out how they're going to get that. In some cases, in this particular case, the resources are provided for the students. And then there's lots there for students to go to, and then they make their conclusion at the end of the day as to, you know, what are the connections between the different spheres in the boreal forest, and what role does resources and conservation have in that interaction as well. So it's a fairly complicated question, but if we're good at the surface level and we do lots of practice to deepen those understandings and practice doing those things in the deep level, then they're going to be successful on this, what apparently could be a very complicated exercise, but likely be successful if we go through those phases of learning.
And this is a great one to really solidify some of their investigative approaches. I mean, it has so many different areas they can go into. Again, if you can tap into their interest level, then we're more likely to get there. But also, it also gives them a good chance in a perfect world. If everybody has gone through all the science grades already, they're really well versed in sort of that process of investigation. But nonetheless, this is one of the best organizing ideas for that.
Oh, that's just a graphic organizer that might go along with, you know, sort of gives students, well, what are you really looking at? Well, we're looking for the interconnections between these things and a description of them, right? And so that's what we're looking at the end of the day.
So we do have a number of resources that may be of help to you, and I'm going to show you some, but I apologize I came in late. I was doing another session. I'm going to share some of those resources with you, but before we're going to send you a PDF. We're going to put it in the chat box. But when we post it to the website, I want you to know that there will be additional resources that we're going to put into this. So there will be a few new books that actually just arrived today. So bonus, we'll put those in as well. So really, when we're talking about things like just resources for the spheres, I'm looking at additional videos. I'm not saying all of these should be used. It's where you're at with the students and how you did your units. You have additional ones in here that you can use for sure. The other pieces that we want to consider that we're going to talk about here in just a second is also the Indigenous connections to the spheres and the understandings that they have as well. So we have some sample sources. Again, this deals with water for living things and what are the connections between that, life sciences, the simple sciences. Water is huge, and we need to make sure that we're really clear on that. When I talk about the connection for the Indigenous perspective on water, remember that water is extremely important in our First Nations stories in their world of life, because it's treated with reverence. If I'm going to take something from the water, I would offer protocol before I would do that. So again, the water has, and this is appropriately titled, quite a relationship, a sacred relationship with our Indigenous peoples. There was a whole series that was created from and called the Sacred Relationships. And it was done by the elders within Alberta. This is a completely 100% Alberta based, done mostly at Wabamun Lake. And it talks about a lot of the wetlands. It talks about protocol. It talks about what Mother Earth gave us. And it talks about what is water? Why is it so important? And in that particular unit, when you click on this Sacred Relationships, it will take you to lesson plans for grades 5 and 6. Now, the grade is insignificant. It's the topic that you are looking for. And in this case, it impacts the entire wetlands. There's an entire wetlands unit in there, but also there's a great connection with the elders telling the stories of the waters as well. I really encourage you to click this one on and spend a little bit of time there. There's lots of videos that you can show with the students as well, very age appropriate for the students. And that gives them an opportunity to meet an elder, even though not in person, who is talking about the importance of water, the importance of land, the importance of Mother Earth. So we have it right here again. These are just some other links. They came from previous grades, but they're really appropriate here again. So what is water and the air that we breathe? So talking about those two spheres alone. This is one that links into that very well. And these are some of the new books that we found that are a really good match. This one is one of the few books that is almost a 100% match to our organizing idea. There is nothing in here that would not fit with grade 4. It's a rarity, because so far we've only been finding books that are like a one cusp sort of match to it, but this one is great, and it really has great diagrams, it has great explanations, so it could be a great one to put into your school library. It could also be one that you could just sort of service within your classroom library. These are books that we got from the US, but they are available through Pearson Canada, so we can order them from there as well. And same with the one that's following up here. We have Earth Cycles. It is not specific to the spheres, but related to it directly. So again, this is another book that you would find very helpful. Use a bit of a descriptor there, also available through Pearson if that's one that you want to have. And then our resources, like what is in our land? What is in our air? What is in our water? Like what are those resources that we rely on? And why are they so important? So again, when we talk about that, there's your brief descriptor on it, and water, of course, will become one of those big ones that they talk about. So having that previous work with glaciers would be helpful, having a little bit of knowledge there. One of the other ones that is a great book for telling stories or legends or beliefs is Keepers of the Earth series. Keepers of the Earth, there's Keepers of the Earth, Keepers of the Sky. This one is a particular one which talks about, and it is Native American, so we have to be careful a little bit about some of the stories and legends, but it's okay for students to hear other versions of that. What are some of the things about the air, about the sky, about the trees, about the land that were legends that were being kept? So this is a book that is a great series to have. It's one of 4, but I found this book is very helpful, more so than some of the other ones were. And the other one that we have shown in other grades as well is the one on the walk. It is one in which an elder takes a student through the forest and explores, looks at the sky, looks at the air, talks about the importance. and does that through the 7 sacred animals, the 7 sacred teachings. So again, it's a storybook that you may wish to consider having in your classroom resource library as well. Okay, and we have computing science. Remember that if you've been with us before, Ange Deering has gone through, and we need to get her grade 4 link in there. But Ange Deering has gone through and she has created for you in each of the grades. So this is not, we'll change it to grade 4 by the time we get this out.
Yeah,
But
I haven't seen the grade 4 one unless you have it, Chris. So
oh, okay, my apologies, but I do think she has them all done, so I will check with her. But we have them, and in this, what she's doing is creating a video, she's creating a slide deck for you, and a specific lesson that you can use specific to your grade and your organizing idea. So these are the pieces that we want to include in there. So we'll check on that one for you as well. So we have one more session, we have 2 more sessions that we're going to be doing. The next one will be in early November, in which we talk about energy. And then the last one, and that starts with grades 4, 5, and 6, is you have the extra organizing idea of space. And so that will be one that we'll be looking at as well. We want to also remind you that we do have an assessment session that we have created for 4, 5, and 6. And that is happening in February, with the second one happening in May, I believe it is. If you are interested in sort of creating an assessment component to your science program, then you might want to join us on those 2 days. They are 2 full days. We're going to be very busy on those 2 days, but again, it's a conversation and roll up our sleeves and let's get some of that work done. So you can check either the CARC or the ERLC site, and that will give you an opportunity to register for that. There's no cost for it, but it will be specific to grade 4. There'll be one for grade 5, there'll be one for grade 6. So just pointing those out to you as well. All right, so I think that pretty much covers everything. Is there any questions? I know, Rhonda, you're by yourself right now, but is there anything that we didn't cover that maybe you were looking for that we can help you with? I'm going to just stop our recording here.
Mhm.